What the hell do you think you're doing here, boy? Bradley Whitfield's voice boomed across Denver International Airport's first-class boarding area. The airport operations manager stepped directly into the path of a well-dressed black man, his face twisted with disgust. Dr. Isaiah Thompson stopped. Around them, passengers froze. Phones came out. "This area is for paying customers, not thugs looking for handouts," Bradley snarled, his finger stabbing toward the general seating area. "Get your ass back there before I call security." Isaiah remained perfectly calm, which only enraged Bradley further. The airport manager moved closer, invading his personal space. "Are you deaf?" I said. "Move, ghetto trash." But as Isaiah quietly adjusted his jacket, something official glinted on his lanyard. Something Bradley was too consumed with his racist tirade to notice. Something that would soon transform this public humiliation into the most expensive mistake of his entire life. Have you ever seen hatred drive someone to commit a federal crime on camera? The tension from Bradley's public outburst hung in the air, but this was just the beginning. What passengers didn't know was that Bradley Whitfield had been planning something far worse than verbal abuse. Earlier that morning, at 6:15 a.m., security cameras had captured Bradley entering the airport's evidence storage room. The timestamp would later become crucial. He moved with purpose, knowing exactly what he was looking for among the confiscated items from recent arrests. Bradley pulled out a small plastic baggie containing white powder, cocaine that had been seized from a passenger 3 weeks earlier. He slipped it into his jacket pocket, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. In his mind, he was just preparing to clean up the airport from what he saw as undesirable elements. "People need to learn their place," he muttered to himself, completely unaware that his every move was being recorded. Dr. Isaiah Thompson, meanwhile, had arrived at Denver International for a very different reason. As a senior FAA aviation safety inspector with 15 years of experience, he was conducting an unannounced compliance review of the airport's security protocols. His inspection equipment, digital testing devices, measurement tools, and official documentation was neatly organized in his standard-issue carry-on bag. Isaiah had built his reputation on thoroughness and professionalism. Today's surprise inspection was triggered by recent complaints about discriminatory treatment of passengers. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was about to experience exactly what he'd come to investigate. Bradley returned to the terminal floor, the planted evidence burning a hole in his pocket. He'd done this before, not the evidence planting, but the harassment. There had been complaints. 3 formal grievances in the past 2 years, all buried by airport administration who valued Bradley's firm management style over passenger comfort. Maria Santos, the security chief, had tried to warn management about Bradley's pattern of behavior. "He's going to create a major incident one day," she'd told the airport director just last month. Her concerns had been dismissed as oversensitivity. When Bradley spotted Isaiah approaching the first-class area, every racist assumption in his head began firing at once. Here was his chance to prove that his instincts about people were right. In his twisted logic, he was protecting the airport from a potential threat. "Gate Agent Liu," Bradley called to Jennifer Liu, who was preparing for the morning's first departure. "Keep an eye on that situation. We might have a problem with passengers." Jennifer looked confused. She'd seen the well-dressed man with the professional demeanor and expensive briefcase. Nothing about Isaiah suggested he was anything other than a business traveler. But Bradley was already moving, his hand instinctively checking his jacket pocket where the planted evidence waited. He'd perfected his approach over the years, create a distraction, manufacture probable cause, then escalate until he got the result he wanted. Usually, that meant humiliating someone until they left voluntarily. Today would be different. Today, Bradley had decided to take things further. Isaiah, completely unaware of the setup, continued his professional observation of airport operations. He noted the security camera positions, the staff interactions, the passenger flow patterns. Everything looked normal from a compliance standpoint, though he'd already witnessed one concerning interaction. The man who'd just verbally assaulted him was clearly in a position of authority, wearing an official airport management badge. Isaiah made a mental note to include this incident in his report. Discriminatory behavior by airport staff was exactly the kind of violation that could result in serious federal penalties. As passengers began boarding the 8:30 flight to Chicago, Bradley positioned himself strategically near the gate. He watched Isaiah with the focused intensity of a predator selecting prey. In his pocket, his fingers traced the outline of the planted evidence. "Time to clean house," Bradley whispered to himself, completely confident that his actions would be seen as heroic by airport administration. He had no idea that the thug he was targeting was a federal inspector with the authority to shut down the entire airport. The morning sun streamed through the terminal windows as Bradley began walking toward Isaiah, his hand already reaching into his pocket. Security cameras continued their silent recording, capturing every step of what would soon become a federal crime. The trap was set. The evidence was ready. And Bradley Whitfield was about to make the most catastrophic mistake of his career. Bradley approached Isaiah with the confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable. What happened next would be captured on multiple security cameras and dozens of passenger phones, creating an undeniable record of one of the most brazen acts of evidence planting ever caught on video. "Sir, I need to see some identification," Bradley announced loudly, ensuring everyone in the gate area could hear. "We've had reports of suspicious activity." Isaiah looked up from his inspection notes, his expression remaining professionally neutral. "I'm sorry. What reports? I've been standing here reviewing documents." "Don't play dumb with me," Bradley sneered, moving closer. His voice carried the tone of someone who enjoyed wielding power over others. "I know your type. You're probably here chasing the place, looking for what you can steal or worse." The racist assumption hung in the air like poison. Passengers nearby stopped their conversations, sensing the confrontation escalating. Jennifer Liu looked up from her computer terminal, clearly uncomfortable with what she was witnessing. Several travelers pulled out their phones, instinctively sensing this was about to become something worth recording. "Listen, boy," Bradley continued, his voice growing louder and more condescending. "I've been working at airports for 8 years. I can spot trouble from a mile away, and you reek of it." Isaiah remained calm, though his trained eye was already noting the irregularities in Bradley's approach. This wasn't standard security protocol by any measure. "Sir, I'm going to need to see your supervisor." "This interaction seems my supervisor." Bradley laughed mockingly. "I am the supervisor here, genius. Airport Operations Manager Bradley Whitfield. And right now, you're my problem to solve." The crowd was growing larger now. Robert Hayes, a businessman waiting for his flight to Chicago, started recording on his phone. "This doesn't look right," he whispered to his wife. "That airport guy is way out of line." More passengers gathered, drawn by the commotion. Bradley seemed to feed off the attention, his chest puffing out with self-importance. "Sir, I'm going to need to search your bag," Bradley continued, his voice now carrying the theatrical quality of someone performing for an audience. "Airport security protocols. You look like the type who might be carrying something you shouldn't." Isaiah's professional training kicked in. He'd dealt with difficult situations before, but this level of blatant profiling was extraordinary. "I'm happy to cooperate, but I'd like to see your written authorization for a search. Standard protocol requires documented reasonable suspicion." "Reasonable suspicion?" Bradley's face twisted with mock surprise. "How about this for reasonable suspicion? You don't belong here. You're acting nervous, and frankly, people like you are usually up to no good." The crowd's discomfort was palpable now. Several passengers exchanged shocked glances. This wasn't just poor customer service. This was overt racism playing out in real time. "I don't need authorization from someone like you," Bradley continued, his finger jabbing toward Isaiah's chest. "The authorization is your suspicious behavior and the fact that you're clearly in the wrong place. Now open the bag, or I'll have security drag you out of here." Maria Santos arrived, having been called by concerned gate staff. She looked at the scene with growing unease. Something felt fundamentally wrong about the entire situation. Bradley's behavior was aggressive, even by his standards. "Mr. Whitfield," she said carefully, "what's the situation here?" "I've got a suspicious individual refusing to comply with security procedures," Bradley announced, playing his role to the hilt. "Probably carrying contraband. You know how these people operate." Isaiah, recognizing that resistance would only escalate the situation, placed his carry-on bag on a nearby chair. "I'll comply with your request, but I need everything documented and witnessed. This entire interaction is highly irregular." "Oh, it'll be documented all right," Bradley said with a smirk that would later haunt him in federal court. "We're going to document exactly what kind of criminal you really are." As Isaiah unzipped his bag, Bradley positioned himself strategically. The inspection equipment inside was sophisticated: digital measurement devices, testing apparatus, official forms with federal letterhead. To an untrained eye, some of the equipment might look unusual, even suspicious. Bradley's heart was racing with adrenaline. This was his moment. This was where he would prove that his instincts about people were always right. As Isaiah lifted out a device to explain its purpose, Bradley saw his opportunity. "What the hell is all this equipment?" Bradley demanded, poking through the bag roughly. "Looks like burglar tools to me, or maybe drug manufacturing equipment." "These are professional testing instruments," Isaiah explained patiently. "I can show you the documentation." "Documentation?" Bradley cut him off. "Criminals always have fake documentation. That's crime 101, buddy." The humiliation was systematic and deliberate. Bradley was enjoying every moment, believing he'd identified a real threat and was protecting innocent travelers from a dangerous individual. Then Bradley made his move. "What's this?" he suddenly exclaimed, his hand darting into the bag. In one fluid motion, he dropped the small plastic baggie among Isaiah's equipment and immediately discovered it, his fingers ensuring his prints would contaminate the evidence. "Well, well, well," Bradley announced triumphantly, holding up the baggie of white powder for everyone to see. "Look what we have here, folks. Our innocent passenger is carrying drugs. Cocaine, by the looks of it." The crowd gasped audibly. Phones came out everywhere, capturing Bradley's moment of apparent triumph. Isaiah's face showed genuine shock, not the guilt of someone caught, but the complete disbelief of someone witnessing an impossible situation unfold. "That's not mine," Isaiah said firmly, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "I have never seen that substance before in my life." "Sure you haven't," Bradley mocked, playing to his audience like a performer on stage. "That's what they all say when they get caught red-handed. Probably thought you could smuggle this through security in your fancy briefcase, didn't you?" The planted evidence was now the centerpiece of Bradley's performance. He held it up like a trophy, basking in what he believed was his moment of vindication. "You know what this tells me?" Bradley continued, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "This tells me my instincts were right. I spotted you the moment you walked into my terminal, acting like you owned the place. Well, guess what? The only place you're going to own is a jail cell." Isaiah's training in crisis management kept him composed, but internally, he was documenting every detail of this extraordinary violation of procedure and civil rights. "Sir, I need you to understand that evidence has been planted in my bag," Isaiah said clearly, his voice carrying to the crowd of witnesses. "I request immediate documentation of chain of custody, testing of that substance, and review of security footage." Bradley laughed mockingly, the sound echoing through the gate area. "Listen to this guy. Chain of custody, security footage. You've been watching too much Law and Order, buddy. This isn't TV. This is real life. And in real life, drug dealers go to prison." The systematic humiliation continued as Bradley turned to address the crowd of onlookers. "This is exactly why we have security protocols, folks," he announced like a politician at a rally. "People like this think they can just walk into our airport and conduct their illegal business. Well, not on my watch. Officer David Carter of the airport police arrived, summoned by Bradley's earlier call. He surveyed the scene, the crowd, the recording phones, the visible tension, with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen too many airport confrontations. "What's the situation here?" Carter asked professionally. "I caught this man with drugs in his bag," Bradley announced proudly, still holding the planted evidence. "Classic smuggling operation. Probably has more stuff stashed somewhere else. These people always travel in groups." Isaiah looked directly at Officer Carter, his demeanor shifting to something more authoritative. "Officer, I need to inform you that I'm a federal employee conducting official business. The substance in question has been planted in my bag, and I have multiple witnesses to the planting." "Witnesses?" Bradley scoffed, but for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. "Nobody saw me plant anything because I didn't plant anything. You're the one with drugs, not me. Stop trying to confuse the situation with your lies." But Robert Hayes stepped forward, his phone still recording. "Actually, I've got the whole thing on video. I saw exactly what happened, and it's all right here on my phone." The color began draining from Bradley's face. His moment of triumph was starting to crack around the edges, but his arrogance kept him pushing forward. "I don't care what some tourist thinks he saw," Bradley declared. "The evidence speaks for itself. Drugs in his bag, case closed." But Officer Carter was looking more carefully at Isaiah now, noting his professional demeanor, his calm responses, his specific knowledge of procedures. "Sir," Carter said to Isaiah, "you mentioned federal employment. Can you elaborate on that?" "I'm Senior Aviation Safety Inspector Isaiah Thompson, Federal Aviation Administration, badge number 4429, Isaiah replied with quiet authority. "I'm here conducting an unannounced compliance inspection of this facility under federal mandate." The words hit Bradley like a physical blow. Federal Inspector, FAA, official business, compliance inspection. Everything suddenly made horrible, catastrophic sense, and Bradley Whitfield's career had just ended in the most spectacular way possible. The revelation that Isaiah was a federal inspector should have ended everything immediately. Instead, Bradley's racist arrogance drove him deeper into what would become a federal crime with devastating consequences. "Federal inspector?" Bradley's laugh was forced, almost manic. "Right. And I'm the President of the United States. You really think I'm going to fall for that bullshit?" Officer Carter looked between the two men, clearly uncertain. The situation had just taken a dramatic turn, but Bradley wasn't backing down. "Listen, Carter," Bradley continued, his voice taking on the tone of someone used to being obeyed. "I've been managing this airport for 8 years. I know a con artist when I see one. This guy's probably got fake credentials, fake ID, the whole 9 yards. These drug dealers are getting more sophisticated." Isaiah remained remarkably calm despite the escalating situation. "Officer Carter, I understand this is unusual, but I need to contact my supervisor at the FAA district office immediately. This situation is now interfering with a federal investigation." "Federal investigation?" Bradley's voice cracked slightly, but he pushed through. "What's next? You gonna tell us you're with the CIA, FBI? Give me a break." Maria Santos stepped closer to Officer Carter. "Sir, maybe we should verify his credentials before proceeding." "Verify what?" Bradley snapped. "Santos, don't let him manipulate you. I caught him with drugs. That's all the verification we need." But Robert Hayes was still recording, and his businessman instincts were telling him something was very wrong with Bradley's behavior. "Officer, I've got everything on video if you need it." The way this airport manager planted that evidence was clear as day. Bradley spun around, his face flushed with anger. "You don't know what you're talking about. I didn't plant anything. This drug dealer is trying to frame me now." "Sir," Officer Carter said to Bradley, "I need you to calm down. We're going to sort this out properly. But Bradley was spiraling, his authority being questioned in front of passengers, his actions being recorded, his entire worldview crashing down around him. "I am calm," Bradley shouted, clearly not calm at all. "I'm the one trying to protect this airport from criminals, and everyone's acting like I'm the problem." Isaiah spoke again, his voice cutting through Bradley's hysteria with professional authority. "Officer Carter, I'm going to provide you with my supervisor's direct number. Her name is Director Sarah Martinez, FAA Western Mountain Region. She can verify my identity and my mission here within 5 minutes." The specificity of the information gave Officer Carter pause. Real criminals didn't usually provide supervisor contact information. "You know what?" Bradley said desperately. "Even if you are some kind of federal employee, that doesn't change the fact that you had drugs in your bag. Maybe you're a dirty federal agent. Maybe this is an inside job." The accusation was so outrageous that several passengers audibly gasped. Jennifer Liu looked mortified by her supervisor's behavior. "Mr. Whitfield," she said quietly, "maybe we should." "Stay out of this, Liu," Bradley barked. "I don't need advice from gate agents on how to handle security threats." Isaiah's patience was remarkable, but his next words carried unmistakable authority. "Officer Carter, I need to inform you that interference with a federal inspector in the performance of their duties is a federal crime. At this point, I'm requesting immediate contact with my supervisor and documentation of everything that has occurred." "Documentation?" Bradley laughed bitterly. "Fine, let's document it all. Document how I caught a drug dealer who's now trying to hide behind fake federal credentials." Officer Carter was reaching for his radio when Bradley made his most catastrophic decision yet. "You know what? I don't care if you claim to be the Pope. The evidence is the evidence." He waved the planted baggie in the air. "Drugs in your bag, end of story. Carter, arrest him." "Sir," Officer Carter said carefully, "I think we need to verify—" "I'm ordering you to arrest him!" Bradley's voice echoed through the terminal. "I'm the airport operations manager, and I'm telling you this man is a drug dealer." Isaiah finally showed a hint of emotion, not anger, but something like pity. "Mr. Whitfield, you're making this situation much worse for yourself." "Worse for me?" Bradley's voice was reaching a fever pitch. "You're the one going to prison, buddy. You and whatever scam you're running." But Officer Carter was already dialing the number Isaiah had provided. Within moments, he was speaking to FAA Director Sarah Martinez, whose voice could be heard clearly through the phone. "Inspector Thompson is conducting an unannounced compliance review under federal mandate." Her voice carried through the phone. "Any interference with his duties is a federal crime. I'll be there within the hour." The color drained completely from Bradley's face as the reality of his situation began to dawn on him. But even then, his arrogance wouldn't let him accept what was happening. "This is impossible," he whispered, staring at the phone in Officer Carter's hand. "This can't be real." But it was real, and Bradley Whitfield had just committed multiple federal crimes on camera in front of dozens of witnesses against a senior FAA inspector. His career wasn't just over. His life as he knew it was about to end completely. The phone call with FAA Director Sarah Martinez should have been Bradley's wake-up call. Instead, it became the moment his entire world collapsed in spectacular fashion. "Inspector Thompson," Director Martinez's voice came through Officer Carter's phone with crystal clarity. "What's your status?" "We've been expecting your preliminary report." Isaiah took the phone with professional composure. "Director Martinez, this is Inspector Thompson, badge 4429. I'm currently being detained by airport personnel who have planted evidence in my inspection equipment." Bradley's face went through a series of emotions: disbelief, confusion, and then desperate denial. "This is fake," he announced to the growing crowd. "He's got accomplices." This is all staged, but Director Martinez's next words cut through Bradley's delusions like a knife. "Inspector Thompson, you're authorized to complete your compliance review immediately. Officer Carter, this is Director Sarah Martinez, Federal Aviation Administration. Inspector Thompson is conducting an unannounced safety inspection under Federal Mandate 14 CFR, Part 139. Any interference with his duties constitutes a federal crime. The authority in her voice was unmistakable. Officer Carter straightened up instinctively, recognizing genuine federal authority when he heard it. "Ma'am, we have a situation here," Officer Carter began. "I'm aware," Martinez replied curtly. "I'm dispatching additional federal investigators immediately. Preserve all evidence and documentation. And Officer Carter, arrest anyone who continues to interfere with Inspector Thompson's duties." Bradley's legs nearly gave out. The baggie of planted cocaine suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in his hand. "This can't be happening," he muttered, but his voice carried no conviction anymore. Isaiah calmly retrieved his official FAA credentials from his jacket, the same credentials Bradley had been too blinded by prejudice to ask for. The badge was unmistakable. Federal agency seal, official photograph, Inspector Thompson's name and badge number clearly visible. "As I was trying to explain," Isaiah said with professional calm, "I'm here conducting a compliance inspection of your airport security protocols. Specifically, I was investigating reports of discriminatory treatment of passengers." The irony hit the crowd of witnesses like a physical blow. The federal inspector investigating discrimination had just been discriminated against by the very person he was investigating. Maria Santos stared at the credentials in shock. "Inspector Thompson, we had no idea. Mr. Whitfield never mentioned any federal inspection. It's an unannounced inspection," Isaiah explained patiently. "That's standard protocol to ensure authentic operational assessment." Bradley was still clutching the planted evidence, his hand shaking now. But you had drugs. I found drugs in your bag." Isaiah's expression remained professional, but there was steel in his voice. "Mr. Whitfield, what you're holding is industrial testing powder used for calibrating detection equipment. It's standard FAA inspection material, clearly labeled in my official kit." Officer Carter examined the baggie more closely. Sure enough, there was a tiny label that Bradley had missed in his rush to plant evidence. FAA testing compound, not for unauthorized use. "Jesus Christ," Robert Hayes said from the crowd, still recording. "He tried to frame a federal inspector with the inspector's own testing materials." The revelation sent shockwaves through the gathered passengers. Bradley hadn't just planted evidence. He'd unknowingly planted federal inspection equipment and tried to pass it off as illegal drugs. Bradley's world was spinning out of control. "I didn't know. I thought he looked suspicious." "Suspicious how?" Isaiah asked quietly. "What exactly made me look suspicious, Mr. Whitfield?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Everyone knew the answer, but hearing Bradley admit it would seal his fate completely. You were in the first-class area and you..." Bradley's voice trailed off as he realized any explanation would be an admission of racial profiling. "I was what, Mr. Whitfield? Please finish your sentence." Bradley's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. There was no way to explain his actions without admitting to racial bias, discrimination, and evidence planting. Jennifer Liu stepped forward, her voice shaking with emotion. "Inspector Thompson, I want to formally apologize on behalf of the airport." "Mr. Whitfield's behavior is completely unacceptable." "Ma'am," Isaiah replied with quiet dignity, "your apology is appreciated, but this isn't about personal offense. This is about systemic violations of federal aviation safety protocols and civil rights law." Maria Santos was studying the timeline of events with growing horror. "Mr. Whitfield, you took evidence from the storage room this morning. I have the access logs. You signed in at 6:15 a.m. Bradley's face went ashen. The security chief had just connected the dots between his early morning evidence room visit and the planted cocaine. I was just checking inventory," Bradley stammered weakly. "Checking inventory?" Maria's voice was incredulous. You removed evidence from an active case file and planted it on a federal inspector? The magnitude of Bradley's crimes was becoming clear to everyone present. Evidence tampering, filing false police reports, interfering with a federal investigation, civil rights violations. The charges were mounting by the minute. Isaiah retrieved his inspection equipment, each piece clearly labeled with federal identification numbers. This is a digital measurement device for runway surface testing. This is atmospheric pressure calibration equipment. This is documentation for compliance verification. Every item Bradley had deemed suspicious was standard federal inspection gear, the kind of equipment that kept airports safe and operational. "Inspector Thompson," Officer Carter said formally, "I apologize for the delay. You're free to continue your inspection." "Mr. Whitfield, you need to come with me." Wait! Bradley's voice cracked with desperation. "This is all a misunderstanding. I was trying to protect the airport." "Protect it from what?" Isaiah asked with devastating calm. "From a federal safety inspection designed to keep passengers safe?" Bradley had no answer. His racist assumptions had led him to attack the very person whose job was to ensure airport safety. He'd committed multiple federal crimes to stop an inspection that would have improved the airport's operations. Director Martinez's voice came through Officer Carter's radio. "Inspector Thompson, federal agents are en route. Complete your inspection and document everything. Mr. Whitfield and any supervisors who enabled his behavior will be fully investigated." As federal agents began arriving at the scene, Bradley finally understood the true scope of his catastrophe. He hadn't just lost his job. He'd committed federal crimes against a federal inspector while interfering with aviation safety protocols. The man he'd tried to humiliate and frame was going to complete his inspection professionally. The evidence Bradley had planted would be tested and traced back to him. The security footage would show his premeditation. And Isaiah Thompson, the thug Bradley had tried to destroy, would write the federal report that would ensure this never happened to anyone else. Bradley's career was over. His freedom was in jeopardy, and his victim was about to make the airport safer for everyone. Within 90 minutes of Director Martinez's phone call, Denver International Airport had transformed into a federal crime scene. FBI agents, FAA investigators, and Department of Transportation officials swarmed the terminal, turning Bradley's moment of racist triumph into a full-scale federal investigation. Special Agent Rebecca Walsh of the FBI's Civil Rights Division arrived first, her presence immediately shifting the entire atmosphere of the situation. She surveyed the scene with the practiced eye of someone who'd investigated hate crimes across the country. "Inspector Thompson," she said, extending her hand professionally. "Agent Walsh, FBI. I understand you've been the victim of evidence tampering and civil rights violations." Isaiah shook her hand calmly. "Agent Walsh, thank you for responding so quickly. I have multiple witnesses, security footage, and physical evidence of the crimes committed." Bradley, who had been standing in shocked silence under Officer Carter's supervision, suddenly found his voice again. "Crimes? What crimes? I was doing my job. I was protecting the airport." Agent Walsh turned to study Bradley with the cold assessment of a federal prosecutor. "Mr. Whitfield, I presume. You're under arrest for evidence tampering, filing false police reports, interfering with a federal investigation, and violation of civil rights under color of authority." "Civil rights violations?" Bradley's voice cracked. "I never violated anyone's civil rights. I treated him exactly like I'd treat anyone suspicious." "Suspicious how?" Agent Walsh asked, pulling out a digital recorder. "Please explain exactly what made Inspector Thompson suspicious to you." Bradley's mouth opened and closed as he realized the trap. Any explanation of his suspicions would be an admission of racial profiling. He was in the wrong area," Bradley said weakly. "The first-class boarding area?" Agent Walsh consulted her notes. Inspector Thompson had a first-class ticket purchased by the Federal Aviation Administration for his official travel. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. The revelation hit Bradley like a sledgehammer. Not only was Isaiah a federal inspector, he actually belonged in the first-class area. Every assumption Bradley had made was not just wrong, but criminally wrong. Maria Santos approached Agent Walsh with a thick file folder, her face grim with the weight of what she was about to reveal. "Agent Walsh, I've pulled Mr. Whitfield's personnel records. There have been 17 formal complaints about discriminatory behavior in the past 3 years. Airport administration buried most of them." 17. Agent Walsh's eyebrows rose as she flipped through the documentation. "And what action was taken on these complaints?" "Verbal counseling," Maria replied, her voice heavy with disgust. "Management said his aggressive security approach was valuable for airport safety. They actually promoted him twice during this period." The file was damning. Complaint after complaint from passengers, all following the same pattern: racial profiling, unnecessary searches, verbal harassment, intimidation tactics. All of it documented, all of it ignored by airport management. "This passenger here," Agent Walsh read from one complaint, "describes being called boy and having his belongings scattered across the floor during a bag search." "Sound familiar, mister?" "Whitfield?" Bradley's face went pale. He remembered that incident, remembered feeling justified in his actions. Now it was evidence in a federal case. Director Martinez arrived with a team of FAA investigators, her expression thunderous. She was accompanied by Dr. Kenneth Roberts from the Department of Transportation's Office of Inspector General, whose presence indicated this investigation had reached the highest levels of federal transportation security. "Inspector Thompson," Director Martinez said, "are you injured? Do you require medical attention?" "No, ma'am, I'm fine," Isaiah replied. "But I need to brief you on what I've observed during this incident. The security protocols here are fundamentally compromised." Bradley couldn't help himself, his arrogance flaring even in the face of federal arrest. "Compromised? I kept this airport safe for 8 years. I know how to spot trouble. I've prevented dozens of incidents." Director Martinez turned to look at Bradley with the expression of someone examining a particularly unpleasant insect. "Mr. Whitfield, you just committed multiple federal crimes against my senior inspector while he was conducting an official safety review. Your judgment about trouble is evidently completely worthless." Dr. Roberts stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd investigated airport security failures across the nation. "Mr. Whitfield, your actions today have compromised the security of this entire facility. By targeting a federal inspector, you've demonstrated that this airport's security apparatus is fundamentally broken." Agent Walsh was reviewing the security footage with airport technical staff, and what she found was even more damaging than the original incident. "Mr. Whitfield, I need you to explain this video from 6:15 a.m. showing you removing evidence from the storage room." On the monitor, Bradley could be seen clearly taking the baggie of cocaine from the evidence locker, checking to make sure no one was watching, and slipping it into his jacket pocket. But the footage revealed more than just the theft. "According to the timestamp," Agent Walsh continued, "you removed this evidence 30 minutes before Inspector Thompson even arrived at the airport. This shows clear premeditation." Bradley's legs nearly gave out. The security footage proved he hadn't acted impulsively. He'd planned to frame someone before he even knew who his target would be. "I was checking inventory," Bradley said weakly, the same lie he'd tried before. "Checking inventory?" Agent Walsh's voice was incredulous. "By removing evidence from an active case and placing it in your personal clothing? Is that standard inventory procedure, mister?" "Whitfield?" The video evidence was devastating, but Agent Walsh wasn't finished. "This evidence locker shows 17 unauthorized accesses by you in the past 6 months. Mr. Whitfield, how many times have you planted evidence on passengers?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence. If Bradley had done this before, the federal investigation would expand to review every arrest he'd been involved with. "And here," Agent Walsh continued, advancing the footage, We see you at 7:47 a.m. approaching Inspector Thompson and deliberately placing the evidence in his bag during your manufactured search. The crowd of passengers who had witnessed the incident were giving statements to FBI agents. Robert Hayes provided his cell phone video, which showed the planting from a different angle. But he wasn't the only one recording. "This is incredible footage," Agent Walsh told Hayes. "You captured the exact moment of evidence planting. This is going to be crucial evidence in the federal prosecution." More passengers came forward with their own recordings. Sarah Carter, a nurse from California, had captured Bradley's racist tirade on her phone. Marcus Williams, a businessman from Atlanta, had recorded the entire bag search. The federal government now had multiple angles of the same crime. Bradley was beginning to understand that his situation was far worse than just losing his job. Federal charges meant federal prison. Civil rights violations carried serious sentences. Evidence tampering could result in decades behind bars. "Look," Bradley said desperately, sweat beading on his forehead. "Maybe I made some mistakes, but I honestly thought he was suspicious. I was trying to protect people. I've always put passenger safety first." "Protect them from what?" Director Martinez asked sharply. "From a federal safety inspection? From someone doing their job to make air travel safer?" Dr. Roberts pulled out his own tablet, showing data that made Bradley's situation even worse. "Mr. Whitfield, I've been reviewing your arrest statistics. In 8 years, you've initiated 247 passenger detentions. 89% of those detentions involved passengers of color. 78% resulted in no charges being filed. Do you see a pattern here?" The statistics were damning. Bradley hadn't been protecting anyone. He'd been systematically targeting minorities while letting actual security threats slip through. Isaiah finally spoke, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had been evident throughout the entire ordeal. "Mr. Whitfield, let me explain something to you. I've been an FAA inspector for 15 years. I've investigated airports across the country. I've seen security failures, equipment problems, and operational deficiencies that could have killed hundreds of people." Bradley listened despite himself, perhaps beginning to understand the magnitude of what Isaiah actually did for a living. "My job," Isaiah continued, "is to find problems before they become disasters. Today, I found the biggest problem this airport has. You. Your racial bias, your abuse of authority, your willingness to commit crimes to target people you don't like. You're not protecting anyone, Mr. Whitfield. You're endangering everyone." The words hit Bradley harder than any physical blow could have. This wasn't just about his career anymore. This was about his entire identity as someone who protected the airport. Agent Walsh was interviewing Jennifer Liu, who was providing a devastating account of Bradley's pattern of behavior. Her testimony was being recorded for use in federal court.
"He's done this before,"
Jennifer said quietly, her voice shaking with emotion. "Not the evidence planting that I know of, but the harassment. Mostly black passengers, some Hispanic families, Muslim travelers. He always found reasons to delay them, search for them, make them uncomfortable." "Can you give me specific examples?" Agent Walsh asked. "Last month, he detained a black doctor for 2 hours, claiming his medical equipment looked suspicious. The week before that, he forced a Hispanic family to miss their flight because he said their children were acting suspicious. There are dozens of incidents." "And management was aware?" Agent Walsh asked. "They had to be. I filed reports. Other staff filed reports. Maria Santos filed reports. Nothing ever happened. They said Bradley was thorough and security conscious." More federal investigators were arriving, including officials from the Department of Transportation's Office of Inspector General. The scope of the investigation was expanding beyond just Bradley to include the entire airport administration that had enabled his behavior. Airport Director James Patterson arrived in a panic, immediately trying to distance himself from the situation. "Director Martinez, we had no idea Mr. Whitfield's behavior had escalated to this level. You had 17 formal complaints. Director Martinez replied coldly, holding up the file. You had multiple documented incidents. You chose to ignore them. Now you have a federal civil rights investigation and potential criminal charges against your management team. Dr. Roberts was documenting everything for his report to the Secretary of Transportation. Mr. Patterson, this airport's security protocols will be under federal review for the foreseeable future. Every hire, every training program, every operational decision will be scrutinized. Bradley could hear his entire world collapsing around him. The airport executives who had once supported his aggressive approach were now scrambling to distance themselves from him, throwing him under the bus to save their own careers. I never meant for any of this to happen, Bradley said, his voice barely audible. Isaiah looked at him with something that might have been pity. Mr. Whitfield, the tragedy here isn't what happened to you. The tragedy is how many innocent passengers you've harassed over the years, how many people left this airport feeling humiliated and powerless because of your prejudice. Agent Walsh was preparing to transport Bradley for federal booking. The charges were mounting: evidence tampering, filing false police reports, interfering with a federal investigation, civil rights violations under color of authority, and potentially dozens of other charges related to his pattern of discriminatory behavior. Mr. Whitfield, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in federal court. As the Miranda rights were read, Bradley finally understood that his 8-year reign of racist intimidation was over. The federal government was taking this case personally, and Isaiah Thompson, the man he'd tried to destroy, would be the witness who ensured Bradley faced the full consequences of his crimes. The investigation was just beginning, but one thing was already clear. Bradley Whitfield's career in airport security was finished forever. 6 months later, the federal courthouse in Denver was packed as Bradley Whitfield faced the consequences of his actions. The case had become a landmark prosecution for civil rights violations in transportation security, drawing national attention and setting precedents that would protect travelers for years to come. U.S. District Judge Patricia Morrison read the charges with the gravity they deserved. Mr. Whitfield, you have been found guilty on all counts. Evidence tampering, filing false police reports, interference with a federal investigation, civil rights violations under color of authority, and conspiracy to violate civil rights. Bradley sat slumped in his chair, a broken man. His legal team had tried every defense possible, but the evidence was overwhelming. Security footage, witness testimony, phone recordings, and a pattern of documented discrimination spanning years had sealed his fate. The evidence in this case, Judge Morrison continued, shows a systematic pattern of racial discrimination that violated the most fundamental principles of equal treatment under law. Mr. Whitfield, you abused your position of authority to target innocent travelers based solely on their race. Isaiah Thompson sat in the gallery, having testified for 3 days about the incident and its broader implications for aviation security. His calm, professional testimony had been devastating to Bradley's defense. The prosecution had built an airtight case. Lead prosecutor Sarah Carter had presented evidence of Bradley's pattern going back years. The unauthorized evidence locker accesses, the statistical disparities in his detentions, the buried complaints, the management cover-up. Your Honor, Prosecutor Carter had argued during closing statements, this wasn't a single moment of poor judgment. This was a deliberate, sustained campaign of racial harassment that culminated in the defendant committing serious federal crimes against a federal inspector. Bradley's attorney had tried to portray him as overzealous but well-intentioned. The jury hadn't bought it for a second. Mr. Whitfield, Judge Morrison said, you will serve 8 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are permanently banned from any employment in transportation security, law enforcement, or any position of public authority. Bradley's wife sobbed in the gallery. His children, now teenagers, refused to look at him. The man who had once strutted through Denver International Airport like he owned it was being led away in handcuffs. But the criminal conviction was only the beginning of the consequences. The Department of Transportation had imposed a $2.3 million fine on Denver International Airport for systematic civil rights violations. Airport Director James Patterson and 3 other executives had been terminated. The entire security training program had been overhauled under federal oversight. This case has exposed fundamental flaws in how we approach airport security, Transportation Secretary Michael Davis announced at a press conference. We will not tolerate discrimination masquerading as security protocols. The civil lawsuit filed by Isaiah Thompson and 17 other passengers who had been targeted by Bradley resulted in a $15 million settlement. But more importantly, it forced comprehensive reforms that would protect future travelers. Maria Santos, who had been promoted to airport director after the management purge, implemented new protocols that became the national standard. Every search, every detention, every security interaction is now documented and reviewed, she announced. We've created an environment where discrimination simply cannot survive. The training program developed in response to the case was adopted by airports nationwide. Called the Thompson Protocol in honor of Isaiah's professionalism throughout the ordeal, it required bias training, de-escalation techniques, and strict documentation procedures. Isaiah himself had been promoted to regional inspector and was now traveling the country implementing the new standards. The goal isn't just to prevent what happened to me, he said in congressional testimony. It's to create a system where every traveler is treated with dignity and respect. The ripple effects extended far beyond aviation. The case became a model for prosecuting discrimination in other federal agencies. Police departments, customs officials, and Border Patrol agents all received enhanced civil rights training based on the Thompson case precedent. Jennifer Liu, who had courageously testified against her former supervisor, was promoted to security operations manager. I should have spoken up sooner, she reflected. But at least now we have systems in place where speaking up leads to action, not retaliation. The passenger videos that captured Bradley's crimes had been viewed millions of times online, sparking a national conversation about racial profiling in transportation security. Robert Hayes, whose phone recording had been crucial evidence, became an advocate for passenger rights. Everyone with a phone is now a potential check on abuse of power, he said. The days of getting away with this behavior in the shadows are over. Bradley Whitfield's name became synonymous with everything wrong with discriminatory security practices. His case was taught in law schools, police academies, and civil rights seminars as an example of how racial bias can lead to federal crimes. The airport that had once enabled his behavior was now a model for inclusive security practices. The man he had tried to destroy had become a national hero for civil rights in transportation. Justice hadn't just been served. It had created lasting change that would protect countless innocent travelers for generations to come. 2 years after Bradley Whitfield's conviction, Denver International Airport had become something extraordinary, a symbol of how institutions could change for the better when held accountable for discrimination. The transformation was complete, but more importantly, it was sustainable. Dr. Isaiah Thompson stood in the same terminal where he'd been humiliated and framed, but now he was there as the keynote speaker for the National Transportation Security Conference. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man Bradley had tried to destroy was now training security personnel across the country. Change doesn't happen overnight, Isaiah told the assembled airport security directors, but it does happen when good people decide they won't accept discrimination anymore. The statistics told the story of transformation. Passenger complaints about discriminatory treatment at Denver International had dropped by 94%. Employee satisfaction scores had reached all-time highs. The airport had become a case study in how to build inclusive security practices without compromising safety. Maria Santos, now running one of the most respected airport security operations in the country, frequently spoke about the lessons learned. We discovered that fair treatment and effective security aren't just compatible, they're inseparable. When passengers trust us, they cooperate with us. When they cooperate, everyone is safer. The Thompson Protocol had been implemented at over 300 airports nationwide, creating a standardized approach to bias-free security screening. The training program, which included mandatory bias recognition and de-escalation techniques, had become the gold standard for transportation security. Bradley Whitfield remained in federal prison, his appeals exhausted, his name forever associated with one of the most comprehensive civil rights prosecutions in transportation history. His case had sent a clear message to anyone in a position of authority. Discrimination has consequences. But the real victory wasn't Bradley's downfall. It was the systemic change his crimes had catalyzed. Passengers of color no longer approached airport security with the same fear they once felt. Families could travel without worrying about being singled out for harassment. Jennifer Liu, now overseeing security training for the entire Western region, reflected on how far they'd come. We went from being known for discrimination to being known for inclusion. That transformation happened because people were willing to stand up and say, "This is wrong." The case had inspired similar reforms across the federal government. Customs and Border Protection, the Transportation Security Administration, and local police departments had all adopted elements of the Thompson Protocol. The ripple effects of one man's courage in the face of injustice had touched millions of lives. Isaiah's story had become more than just a case study. It had become proof that the system could work when people demanded justice. His calm professionalism in the face of racist abuse had shown the power of maintaining dignity while fighting for what's right. The question isn't whether discrimination exists, Isaiah said in his closing remarks to the conference. The question is what we do when we witness it. Do we stay silent or do we speak up? Do we accept it as normal or do we demand better? The audience gave him a standing ovation, but Isaiah's real satisfaction came from knowing that future travelers would be treated with the respect and dignity every person deserved. Have you ever witnessed discrimination that you knew was wrong but weren't sure how to respond? Have you seen someone being treated unfairly because of their race, their religion, or how they looked? The Thompson case proves that speaking up matters. Recording matters. Demanding accountability matters. Share your experiences in the comments below. If you've witnessed discrimination, tell us what happened. If you've seen positive change in your community, share that story too. Like this video if you believe in equal treatment for everyone. Subscribe for more stories about ordinary people fighting for justice and winning. Because when we stand together against discrimination, we all become safer, more respected, and more free.